We're talking about podcasting today, and we're going to be talking about the tech side of podcasting. But even cooler than that, I have none other than Zachariah Moreno with me, CEO and co-founder of Squadcast, and we're going to get the perspective of the tech side of this. Because you might just think we're recording an episode, but what if you had a dream to build your own business and you wanted it in the software space, in the tech space? What does that take? I'm interested to find out more right after we thank our sponsor. How would you like to grow your wealth easier than you think with the change you probably don't notice anyhow automatically? That's why I started the Compounding Interest Snowball, investing with acorns, and advise you do too. Get started simply and easily today at eainterviews.com/acorns. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Zachariah Moreno. How you doing, Zach?
Very well, Mario. Thank you for that warm introduction. Appreciate it.
Oh, I'm sincerely excited to jump in because I was telling your partner, Rock, on the last interview, I developed a software to build WordPress websites automatically, and I know that tech is no joke, and I'm really curious because I've heard nothing but great things about Squadcast, and I want to know some behind the scenes. What did it take to get it off the ground, and what's it like to keep up with it? Because I know you're doing great things with it, helping a lot of podcasters out, but I know it's no joke, and there's a lot of people who think it's just probably pushing a button, and I assure you it is not.
There's a lot of buttons pushed, and respect for the work that you've done in technology. That's very cool to hear, and it's a very interesting journey that I find myself on, and we find ourselves on, and we're just tremendously grateful to start with to even have the opportunity to innovate and create some cool technology. And that's all in service of empowering podcasters to record quality remote conversations. So our mission is to remove barriers to quality conversation, and we remove a lot of those barriers, and are removing more, in fact, with the technology that we have the pleasure to develop. So that's been about a 4-year journey, and I've made a lot of progress along the way, and it takes it takes a lot. So lots of time and listening go into creating really quality experiences for our customers and their guests to record these podcast interviews, and it's all really in service of their audience. So it's one of my great pleasures to help empower people to be creative, and this journey with Squadcast is the biggest impact that I've been able to have when it comes to helping people express their creativity.
Well, I love what you're doing because there's so many people who want to get into podcasting, and some think it's this daunting task. And I will say it could be construed that way, and depending on your background, but that's true with anything. And other people are like, it's the simplest thing in the world, and then there's companies like you making it even simpler. And I just want everyone to be abundantly clear how much do you I already know the tech plays a big role, but why shouldn't you worry about the tech side so much? Even though it's a huge part of it, what is the main thing they should be focusing on to have a quality interview, a quality episode? And then I'll piggyback on the tech that makes it happen.
Yeah, so the obvious answer is typically you'll hear podcasters and OG podcasters, influencers talk about, microphone and audio interface, and in this case, the camera, and a number of these different kind of things that exist, little boxes that we put on our desk and those kinds of things. And those can help get quality audio. But when you are introducing a remote conversation with somebody on the other side of the planet, the constraints really start to change when it comes to capturing quality audio that to your audience is it's kind of invisible to them, that you're not in the same place. So that's really the trick, is how can we make it easier? Yes, so that it is fun to podcast, and that should be the case. You're not worrying about the technology or kind of if your guest file is going to show up after you're done recording. Those are things that you shouldn't even really have in your mind. They can distract you from having a really flowing and engaging conversation. So that's really what we focus on, is one, making sure that that foundation of technology is there in service of ensuring quality first, and then close second, reliability, to make sure you're always capturing that content and keeping your audience happy and growing. But also, while you're recording, you and your guest are having this flowing dialogue, and the technology at that point should really just fade into the background. So that's really the trick: is how do you have all of this innovative, robust, new technology, but have it really be in the background and disappear? And that's really where the magic of Squadcast lies.
Can you dive into some of that magic? Because I have a question about the audio. We'll just start with the audio because I'm talking into a microphone right now, just like you are, and I know that signal's getting processed. You have uncompressed file formats, you have WAV file formats, MP3, AIFF, all these different things, and we're using one thing in common, the internet. And I don't know what connection you're on. I know what I'm on, but I've had people on the show from Australia, and they're in the middle of the backwoods country. And
Yeah.
it's not a slight to them. They flat out say it on the episodes, and they're literally on a 1.5 to 2 meg connection.
Yep.
And I was blown away because I'm like, what is it, 2001?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
how do you deal with all these different things and varying internet connections and all the different file formats, and then record high quality without killing the bandwidth or having it break down? And if it does break down, how do you not lose everything?
Yeah, and the situation in Australia is particularly interesting because they're kind of at the mercy of just a handful of internet service providers, ISPs, and that's a really tough spot to be in. And there's a ton of podcasters in Australia and content creators creating all sorts of awesome content. So that's thankfully improving. The To answer your question, though, is we really separate the quality of the conversation that we're having is one quality, and that is traveling over the internet. But it's important distinction that that's not actually what's being recorded on Squadcast. What we're recording is, at the same time, we're recording each participant, in this case, Zach and Mario, are recording locally on our device before it travels over the internet. We record it, and then we're pushing it up to the cloud in the background while you're having that conversation. And that's really what empowers the reliability of our solution and our patent pending technology is this autosave, this progressive upload that's happening while you're recording locally. So it's kind of having our cake and eating it too. We can get that really awesome sounding audio quality recorded locally, but without the constraint of what happens in the worst case scenario of my network shutting down or my power going out or my microphone being unplugged. All of these things can and will happen at some point. So we embrace that reality and we engineer for this highly available redundant solution. So I'm a huge space nerd, and that's how we got to the moon, right? Not everything worked perfectly. It didn't have to, because there was these levels of redundancy that were taken into account by the engineers before we ever got in a rocket and sent people to another planetary body in that case. But with podcasting, we can achieve a very high degree of reliability where we have this progressive upload autosave that I mentioned, but then in addition to that, we also have a backup recording engine that is completely independent and is recording the conversation that's going over the web. So you walk away with all of this content that you can put into your podcast and keep your listeners happy and growing.
See, and I just want to stress this point because I don't think people grasp it. I get it from both sides, both as a host and a developer. I've had countless conversations with my team because from the business side excuse me, Stephen, Nick, get rid of that, thanks. The CEO side of me is always thinking the business and how we can improve things and make it more efficient and keep it profitable and all these things. The developer creative side of me is going, well, what does it take to get it done? But the host of me is going, yeah, there's been some serious stuff that's went on. And of course, you don't want to have to re-record it, redo it, because best case scenario, it's not fresh anymore. You know, as a
Yeah, and
public
it's
speaker, I can deliver the same presentation, but if I'm doing the same presentation 10 times in a row that day, you better really know what you're doing and have some behind the scenes like refueling and re-energizing things to keep that energy up.
yeah.
And you can just tell, you can tell in people's voice. It's why I've implemented certain practices on filming and recording day, so that way it's always fresh, no matter, because the reality is I am saying some of the same stuff, and I don't like it when it gets lost, and I don't want to have to do it again. And heaven forbid you're doing an interview show, which I think a lot of podcasts are. Now you're dealing with logistics, insulting someone, this and that, and there's a degree of professionalism. And I think it's
Right.
great you have this focus. And I will tell you, well, I'll tell expert authority world, not all systems do. One of the things that annoyed me about one of the ones I tested that I'm not going to mention because everyone, whatever, I'm not going to mention it. When you're doing episodes back to back, you might only have 30 seconds in between. I can't wait 45 minutes
Yeah.
to get that recording done. So I want to ask you, where was this when you were thinking of it? Was this like number one, or was this, it had to have been in the top 10. I know
Well,
you're thinking about it the right way, and you developed, it sounds like you were thinking about the podcaster and then thought about everything they needed. You didn't just go, oh, that'd be a nice feature, then added it, did you?
no, and we always work to respect everybody's time. So that includes your guests. And if you need to re-record, then that's not a great place to be coming from. And we learned that lesson really early on by listening, and that answers your question as well. So we started out by organically just kind of stumbling on this challenge of recording quality content remotely with an audio drama podcast that we had a distributed remote team for. And that's really what led us down this path. And from there, of course, any technology startup, any kind of company, really, you start off by making assumptions. And those are informed assumptions, the best that you can. And it was very helpful that we were trying to solve our own problem. So there's a lot of empathy that comes from starting there.
Yeah, the pain points.
Right, exactly. So we knew what we were after was a higher quality, and thankfully, audio quality is measurable and can be looked at objectively. So we knew we wanted to provide a higher quality, but the real trick was, how do we deliver that every time? And that's really what sets us apart, is the reliability of how does your app experience still affect people before, during, after the actual production conversation, and still deliver that value proposition every time. So that was a journey for us, and it wasn't obvious. We had more of a traditional upload style when we first started. That took 45 minutes to use your example. When we first started, we got that down to about 15 minutes, and that's not workable, and it's a big step forward. But what happens, the real question is what if we never actually got to the end of the interview? What happens to that file? What happens to my guest recording? And that did happen, and does happen, is that the internet is out of all of our control. Like, we can do things to try to improve the strength of the connection. We can work with a different internet service provider, depending on what country we're in. That may or may not be a free market choice. We help podcasters in over 120 countries, so it varies the reality of the situation. But how can we succeed even in those extreme circumstances? And that's really what pushed us to actually, I can't take credit for Progressive Upload or having that brilliant idea. all credit goes to our founding advisor, Harry Duran, with Podcast Junkies and Fullcast. He was the one
Harry's
who really,
awesome.
he is,
That's
yes, he
fun to
is.
know. I'll have to mention that next time I see him.
Thank you, Harry. Yeah, and it's also led to we have 2 patents pending, and that's one of them. So they wouldn't, my attorneys wouldn't let me put Harry's name on that document. So that's where I give him credit wherever I can, because it really was the catalyst for asking a very simple question of what's happening while we're recording. Does it have to wait until the end to start uploading that file? And the answer wasn't obvious, but physics wise, like base principles, no, it can start before. It can actually, we can use that time to our advantage, where people are having that flowing conversation. You don't need to know that every couple seconds audio is being pushed up to the cloud, but that is what's happening, and that's how we succeed, even those extreme circumstances where somebody's power goes out because there's a wildfire in California and high winds and all of that stuff. Power can go out. It's out of our control. So that's really was the focus, was just asking the right questions and then getting out of the way and listening to what people were telling us they needed. And the rest really flows from there.
That's so cool you were able to incorporate that, and that's exciting too. Yeah, Harry's cool. And these are things I thought about, and it sounds like you think a lot of the same way I do when I was setting up the production of EA interviews, because there's so many moving parts to it. I was just like, okay, cool, how do I get it to just work? Step one is just work.
Yeah,
And then
baseline.
it's like, where are all the bottlenecks at? And the internet, I actually have multiple ISPs that if for whatever reason some car runs into a tower, I can switch the ISP.
Nice.
Because I don't want to lose, it would for sure knock this out, but I could say, okay, come back and say, here, click this instead of that. And I don't need to explain it to you in the moment. But the reality is I'm now not backing up stuff and rescheduling all, you know what I mean?
Right. And if you go into any physical studio, like you have been in, Mario, the engineers there, like, we think of it like we walk in, the talent walks in, sits down, and then, you just kind of start talking. But with a podcast, you're kind of the crew, you're the production, you're the post-production. Sounds like you have a great team behind you. But even with that, yeah, same here. And even with that, though, in physical studios like NPR or Vox or ESPN, the companies we have the pleasure of working with and helping record, they're always recording backups. Like, it's just not on the surface. They don't have to use them very often. But when you do, we all are thankful that engineer had a backup HDMI cable in his bag that never needed to be touched until you really needed it. Right. So that's very much how we approached it with my brother Vince, who's our chief audio officer and head of our support. He is a sound designer and audio producer. So that was very much a part of our culture and approach to engineering early on, was taking that same approach.
See, and I love that you're diving deep with this, because Rock has his strengths, you have yours, your brother has his. And some people, I think it's great when people go, oh, all you need is a mic and just start recording. But the reality is, when you're more invested, you're going to do a better job.
And your audience can tell. Like, that's really what all of this is for. Is it's not, I don't like having this microphone and lighting and stuff because of like my ego and how I want to look. It's because I respect you and your production and your audience, and also my audience, and their experience matters to me as a creative. And that's true with our technology that we engineer as well. Like, the user experience of our product is paramount. The user experience, your audience experience of consuming your podcast, is paramount in that same way.
Yeah, and I would think if there's any, and I would never say be mean to your customers, don't do a good job. However, if there's ever a medium where word is going to get around real quick, it's probably podcasting. Arguably, maybe, probably podcasting would go faster. truthfully. I was going to say something else.
Well,
I'm not going to, though, because everyone is on a mic and it's less work to do audio. Um, and
to
people,
piggyback off of that, though, the that's one of the strengths of working in this industry, and we learned that lesson very early on, that in an industry full of people who speak and talk for a living, we have to be really, really good at listening. And it's a gift that we have our entire industry speaking articulately and clearly, telling us what they want and need from the technology that they're using to capture that speech. You know, we doubled down on that really early on and have continued to invest in our community. Most recently, by hiring the best community manager in the world, I'm convinced is Ariel Nissenblatt with you know, Earbuds Podcast Collective and Outlier, and now with Squadcast. That's something that we're continuing to invest in, and Ariel is crushing it already. She's been on the job for about 2 weeks, so thank you, Ariel.
I'm happy to hear that. And I can tell that, you know, I can tell you're doing it the right way. And I have no doubt you're going to be around for a long time because
Thank you.
you're doing it the right way. You're not just taking the buy any old microphone approach and just start something. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want to be abundantly clear because I started with what I had, but I didn't stay there. Some people
Yeah.
just stay there, and that's a whole mindset thing. But
Yeah, I think it's as complex as you need it to be, but because podcasting is kind of it's not like video where there's a YouTube where there's a centralized place that kind of is the standard setting body. It's moving in that direction, and who knows, maybe one of them will get there.
I don't even know
Um,
if I'll be upset with that because if it's one less thing off my plate, there's plenty on it. And hey,
yeah, I think there's some merit to that thought experiment, and some of the early vision of Squadcast, you know, went there, and we still have those, and that's really interesting momentum we see in the industry. But we focused really early on being the best at solving this problem of
yeah, one
quality
thing.
remote conversations that you get every time you walk away with your content, and your audience is really at the center there. So, you know, having the gift of people telling us what they want and being able to articulate that very clearly is something that is an energy that we have harnessed, and that would only be possible through listening. So that's a core tenet, a principle within our culture.
And I just want to reiterate what you said. It's a great expert authority insight. With an industry that talks, we need to listen. That was powerful. And not
Yeah,
everyone does that, and it doesn't matter of the industry. Some people just, think they know everything. You need to humble yourself, and like you said with the lights and stuff, it's not because you're like, look at me. It's you want to give the best experience. The same reason I set everything up I did, because I don't care if someone listens or watches or whatever. I just enjoy the show.
exactly. And with podcasting, you should just start if you're interested in it, and you don't need much to start. But I think that what we're getting at is that it's an evolution from that starting point to really try to optimize and improve your audience experience. And everybody wants to know how to grow and foster and engage with an audience, but wants to keep things like really beginner and starting out at that place. And you can do that, but I think you will find growth once you start to really optimize for your audience experience through your content, but also just the quality of the content that you're providing them with is a really big component to that.
Wow, you're awesome. That
Well,
was
thank
another
you.
great insight I just thought of, like the butterfly. It's like you're not going to grow if you're always staying in the cocoon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's beautiful because you can get started and there are no gatekeepers and no platform dictating to you or saying that you're going to be deplatformed or something like that. But it's kind of, you know, I think a lot of
Also a
people get,
huge point right there. I heard that.
well, you know, it's choosing when to add complexity and designing for that. And your production is the degree of complexity that it is. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons that have preceded that have gone into that that warrant that complexity, that really add up to this very polished production that your audience, I'm sure, really respects and loves to take part in every week. So that's really where you have choices, and you can opt into those choices. But some choices impact your audience and others don't. So we're, to come back to the community, I love and really frankly miss going to meetups here in the Bay Area. There's great meetups on the city and on the East Bay, and we participate and contribute to all of those. And one of the first questions is microphone and hosting, and those are good questions, but only one of those really impacts your audience's experience. Your audience, they don't care really who you host your podcast with. You care.
Do you think any of them would even know?
No, and there's proof, because people switch their podcast hosting companies all the time, back and forth, and the audience can still subscribe, and it's completely detached from them. The quality of the audio is not improved by hosting. There are some hosts that actually reduce the quality of the audio that they're publishing and distributing. I won't name names, but that's something to be wary of. But you should be mindful of that choice. I am friends with a lot of people who have and empower great services for podcast hosting. I'm not trying to knock them. I'm just saying that decision is about your experience as a host. It's not about the experience.
The audience doesn't
of
know.
your audience.
How many people do you think listening actually think that, oh, I listen? How many of them do you think it's actually hosted on iTunes?
Yeah. I think most listeners, that's their experience, right? It's like,
I listened to your show on iTunes.
Yeah.
That's good. What about the other 38 destinations or whatever there are?
Yeah, exactly. And
how much do you pay iTunes each month for your show? Nothing. It's free.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with you. And what I always nudge people who ask that question is, it is a good question. You do have to make that choice, but it's not a question that impacts your listeners. What it is it, and it's not even really a question of media hosting. It's a question of analytics, and analytics are critical when it comes to further down the line. We all want to set ourselves up for success when it comes to monetizing our podcast, and analytics, being IAB2 compliant, are critical in being able to secure those ad deals and really inform what your CPM rate is with those ad platforms. So you're setting yourself up for success there. You're making it easy on your process. You mentioned WordPress before. You're pretty much choosing a content management system for your podcast, and analytics come baked into that. So that's where I think it's actually, once you get that first episode, or maybe you batch a couple episodes and publish those, once you get that first batch up, your question immediately switches to who's listening, not how do I publish my show. So I think that's the longer term decision that you're making is who's listening, and the analytics really inform that.
You're phenomenal.
Well, thank you kindly. I appreciate that. And
you're honestly nailing it. I knew you were good, but
well, how can I be better? I'm always looking for that. So open to feedback, and I'm enjoying myself as well. It's good to have these platforms to share these ideas, and a lot of these picked up through conversations with the community. So I'll come back to that. And if you're not a active participant, or there's not a meetup in your city for podcasting, I highly encourage you to join one, contribute, or start one if there's not in your area. They've really had a lot of constructive development on my perspective of the podcast industry. And I noticed you have a mutual friend of ours, Chris Kremitzos, in your introduction.
I was just thinking of Chris, and going to mention what do you think about live events, and shout out to Podfest and Chris, and awesome event. It was my first one I went to, and I couldn't agree more. The community, local, national events, worldwide events, whatever the case is, get around other podcasters for sure. And Podfest is one of the best ones.
It's beautiful because, one, Chris and the team are really focused on providing a environment for the community to flourish. And it's it's the event that I prefer, although we frequent lots of events. We always have the most fun, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Florida. Um, but I'm a huge space nerd, like I mentioned. So getting to go to Cape Kennedy is always a dream come true. So thank you, Chris, for all of your contributions to the podcast community. And because podcasting is actively being defined, it's a fairly nascent medium. Um, we think of it as an interview, or we think of it as now maybe audio dramas are in that mix as well. But it's really all being figured out, and it's still pretty early days. So that's really where engaging with the community, there's people who are trying things and doing new things that are having huge impacts on their growth and their show and their ability to deliver value to their audience. And that's something that live events really constrain and synthesize down into a few days or one day. I mean,
it for sure is shedding off, I'd say 6 to 12 months easily for each one. I know people that have had shows for 5 or 10 years. They've never gone to one. And then I went to one after I launched mine and did some different things with the frequency and just changed a few things about the show. And like a few months later, they're asking me like, well, what are you doing for this? I'm like, you've had
That's
6
awesome.
years on me.
Yeah.
And part of the giver in me is like, yeah, let me tell you all the secrets. The other side of me is just thinking like, how have you not gone to one thing in 5 years? So, but that's
just
the
a
beauty of
meetup.
it. People get to do whatever they want.
Yeah, and it's all being figured out. So that's really where you get the best of the community. And one thing that I'll say is that because it's a community of people who speak for a living, the bar is so high for presentations. And if you by all means, put in an application to speak at one of these events for your audience, and I'll do it too. But I've been denied so many times, and that's how I know it's great. Like the content is at that level where it's like you go and you watch and you listen and learn from people who did get accepted to speak, and it's super clear right away. Like, wow, I am not on that level, and I aspire to be, and this is how I'm going to do it, is by being in this room and listening. So don't be discouraged by that. You'll get in there.
Getting around the right people makes all the difference in the world, and I've gone through it too. Some of them, I've spoke at PodFest multiple times. I've got denied from other stuff, and I'm like, cool. You'd appreciate it. It's just data. It's just feedback. Adjust. Try something new.
Yeah. It is always inspiring to me. The ideas that other people come up with, and what you're getting as an attendee of those events, and myself as a sponsor of those events, is you're getting the best of the best every year. Or now they're doing virtual events, and that's really cool to see as well.
And it's only getting better is what I've noticed too. As my show grows and progresses, I've also noticed the events are growing and progressing, and it's just fun to be around people like yourself who are going, hey, we're not happy staying where we are, and there's always just progress being made. So I appreciate you for having that mindset, because not everyone does, and like I said, you're phenomenal. I've noticed that early on. I got one more question for you, and this is a fun part before we go to the sponsor, and we'll come back for the imperfect action round. But it's the famous wheel of whatever. And your question is, where do you see Squadcast 10 years from now?
Yeah. Well, in the coming months, we'll be releasing video recording. So that's incredibly exciting. And it's been a little bit over a year in the making, and we'll have the same focus on quality and reliability that we do with audio. And it's actually the same approach that we take to audio, we're applying to video to achieve that. And that's something that I'm incredibly excited about. So still focused on the podcast community. It may seem like, oh, Squadcast is jumping into video, so they're going to focus on YouTube now or something like that. Absolutely not. We're not changing our focus at all. Podcasters have asked us for this to grow their show and meet their audience in more places. Um, and that is based on the overwhelming excuse me, the overwhelming feedback that we've received from the community, that because we've always had video for the flowing dialogue and conversation, it's an obvious next question to say, well, can we record that? And my audience would love that, and I can grow my show across different platforms and have more places to provide quality content. So absolutely appreciate that feedback very much, and we're taking that to heart and have built something that I believe is very special. So that is right around the corner, and we'll continue to expand on our mission from there of removing barriers to quality conversations. So other barriers that exist that are fun to think about, and I think will be informing our product roadmap and company roadmap, is the audience experience of that we've been discussing. There's the kind of, once you publish it, of course, your quality and your content are impacting the audience's experience of, but there's kind of a delay there where your team produces this content and publishes it. But we're also live right now. And wouldn't it be cool if you could have a live audience while you're recording on Squadcast, both for a private audience and a public live audience?
Ooh,
So I think that there's
sounds
some
like you got
magic
some
there.
cool stuff coming up.
Yeah, the live audience, I think you pretty much know what to expect there. But the private audience is something that is direct customer feedback and community feedback of wanting to have added value for maybe a premium Patreon tier, wanting to engage further with your audience,
Yeah,
and then
that's
some of
been
the
one of
bigger
the biggest
enterprises.
things I've seen in across the board is people want to interact with the community easier, not necessarily on any specific platform, but be able to give them something more and behind the scenes. I'll just say the studio tour, if you will. Maybe there's
Yeah,
some bonus Q&A, and that's the beauty. You can do
it's
pretty
more
much
raw.
anything you want with it. Well, I'm
Hmm.
happy to hear that that's what's coming up because you're already killing it, and I know you're going to keep staying on the same tracks. So thank you for
Well,
that.
thank you. Yeah, that's me talking like as our CTO and technology nerd and all that stuff. But I am also our CEO, so I'm happy to
Can
report that
appreciate that too.
the thank you, the company that we're building is also paramount, because if we go off and build all this fancy technology, but we're not empowering that through a sustainable business model, then it's all for nothing, and Squadcast would disappear like tomorrow or something like that. I'll
Yeah.
knock on wood.
You got to have that vision, and that's honestly why I asked you because I have no doubt you're gonna be around, and that's why I was like, can I get some company secrets out of here? Because I have before. One of the coolest emails I got, I asked someone in the email back from the team after we did the episode. They're like, I didn't even know what flavors were coming out. I'm like, this wheel of whatever is working in my favor here, huh? What's
Yeah.
gonna happen in XYZ? So we're gonna
So
thank our sponsor.
I'm proud to report that we are building a sustainable, healthy business. So yeah, we'll
Yeah, it
definitely
sounds like
continue
it.
to innovate.
We're going to thank our sponsor and come back for the imperfect action round. How would you like to grow your wealth easier than you think with the change you probably don't notice anyhow automatically? That's why I started the compounding interest snowball investing with Acorns and advise you do too. Get started simply and easily today at eainterviews.com/acorns. And we are back with the imperfect action round. Zach, are you ready to take imperfect action? And we are back with the imperfect action round. Zach, are you ready to take imperfect action?
Absolutely.
All right, these are 60-second rapid fire answers. The first one is, what is the fastest path to the profits?
Listening.
Excellent. Number two, what is the biggest problem you see your prospects making and the fastest way for them to fix it?
Not focusing on their audience, and that's really straightforward to fix by listening to your audience. I know that's counterintuitive because they're supposed to be listening to you as the podcaster, but listening to your audience is paramount.
That's huge. Number 3, what is the biggest, what is the best way to maximize customer lifetime value?
um, Giving them a lot to look forward to, but also focusing on today. So focusing on today, but also the future. Being transparent with that. I think a lot of people in technology get secretive with it, and you're putting yourself in a vacuum. So you're not going to get the feedback that helps inform your direction. So getting out of that vacuum and giving people things to look forward to.
Very good. What books would you recommend to Expert Authority World that have helped your business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really love the Shape Up book from Basecamp. That's one that I've read recently, and the I'll say the Startups for the Rest of Us podcast as well. Rob Walling is a mentor of ours, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of his book, but that if you listen to that podcast, he talks about it often.
Beauty of the
Um,
internet, you can find anything.
yeah, absolutely. So I love to learn from podcasts because of the kind of home court advantage, and it's fast as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you for those. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. Where would you like people to learn more?
Yeah, we are very open and part of the community. So if you're in the Bay Area, come to one of the meetups. We're always there and happy to contribute. Whatever your stage of your show, whether you're in person or remote, whatever. It's not really a sales thing. We just like helping people improve their podcast. And we're online at Squadcast FM. Ariel is behind our socials now, so she is an expert in her own right. And also we participate a lot in those conversations as well. And our website is squadcast.fm. If you're into recording podcasts and you need to do that remotely, we can help you do that very easily without sacrificing any quality of the audio.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much. This has been incredible, and it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Mario. Appreciate it.
All right, Expert Authority World, we have another great episode here today. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, and God bless.